This is the blackchannel.net radio, the home of intelligent black thought. And now, as in no other time in our history, brother, don't you need us? Because white supremacy is losing their minds out there. And when the world goes crazy, you need sanity more than ever. Greetings, brothers and sisters from around the world, and welcome back to the home, the haven, the stronghold, and the super fortress of intelligent black thought. This is the blackchannel.net radio. I am your host, your brother, your humble servant, the Black Authority, and of course, sitting in with me tonight, as always, Professor Black Truth. Welcome back to the Black Channel, brother.
Be one, family.
Yes, indeed. Brothers and sisters, we want to give you a casebook study. Understand something. They're going crazy out there, okay? They are losing their minds. They're going nuts. And we haven't even done nothing yet. We haven't even done anything big. You thought that Rosewood was just a joke. You told yourselves white supremacy ain't that bad. We're in a post-racial society. I can disrespect black folk now because I'm going to buy in with the guys who are going to win. I'm going to buy in with white supremacy because they're going to win. So I can diss black folk because they're going to win. And the very second that we start showing signs of life, they lose their minds. Brothers and sisters, I posted up today, and we're going to talk about a number of articles today, but I posted up today, Kevin Sorbo from the TV show Hercules goes on a racist tirade on Facebook. He has since taken his post down. But there's more afoot here than just that. Understand, there's more going on here than just that. Mr. Sorbo had some comments about the protesters in Ferguson. And specifically about the protesters. He had some comments about them. And needless to say, none of them were good. He said, Ferguson riots have very little to do with the shooting of a young man. It is an excuse to be the losers these animals truly are. It is a tipping point to frustration built up over years of not trying, but blaming everyone else. The man for their failures. That's what he said. It is the tipping point to frustration built up over years of not trying, but blaming everyone else, the man, for their failures. It's always someone else's fault when you give up. Hopefully, this is a reminder to the African Americans. I always thought we were just Americans. Oh well, that their president they voted in has only made things worse for them, not better. He went on to quote an article by Alicia Kalan. Now, she's a member of the ultra-right, screwy far-right-wing publication Jewish World Review. And she wrote that those with open minds would question why the mothers of these so-called martyrs, Michael Brown, Trayvon Martin, are hogging the media airwaves when they were not even around their grown children's lives at the time of their deaths. How can you be a grown child? Will someone explain to me the etymology of a grown child? They're not even blanketing their hatred, their vitriol, and their irrationality anymore. It would just be better if they just all came out screaming, nigger, nigger, we hate niggers. That would just be honest. That would actually be a frank and earnest response that you could actually respect. If they just did like Michael Richards and just came out and said, you're niggers, we could live with that. That's a white person being honest. You could live with that. They are letting you all know that Their numbers haven't even really dropped off substantially yet, but in their minds it's substantial enough. Anything that even looks like black people asserting themselves, they are going to step in and stamp it out. And in no uncertain terms. They're not saying this nice and polite. There is no civil discussion proceeding there. They're just blasting you. Grown children, what she meant to say were black dogs and animals. That's what she meant to say. Grown children. So what does that say? That it's okay to kill them? I mean, does she ever explain what it is that justified their murder? They were not even around their grown children's lives at the times of their deaths. That's not true. First of all, that's not true. Second of all, truth doesn't matter in the mind of the bigot. Hating you is what matters in the mind of the bigot. And they are now showing you at every turn that you thought in the 21st century you could find a nice little chair for yourself on Mr. Charlie's plantation. You thought you could coon and act a fool. You thought you could hang out with the fraud and the world star hip hop crowd. That's what you thought was going to happen. And these people are showing you that you might not believe in white supremacy. And plantation jigaboons, like the fraud, might not believe in white supremacy. But guess what? You cowards and liars, white supremacy just let you know that they believe in you. Even if you don't believe in them, they believe in you. And they're coming after you. Like Rosewood. Like Tulsa. Like Wilmington. Like all the others. When they see that black people are asserting themselves, all of a sudden these people that you thought were so quiet and so innocuous and wouldn't say anything, all of a sudden they roar to life. All of a sudden they spring to life and they're coming after you. But don't worry, the jigaboons will find a way to explain this away too. They are experts at ignoring everything. Whether it's attacking Dr. Frances Cress Welsing, they are against black society's survival. We have a unit, a faction inside of the black race that is actively working against black people's survival. White supremacy is not just good, white supremacy is ingenious when they can engineer an organism that works against its own survival. That's genius. But you see, a few years ago something happened. Intelligent Black Society made the biggest, most incredible and improbable comeback in universal history. And intelligent black thought has begun controlling the body politic again. And they understand this, and they understand that this is a numbers game, and they are going to do like the Civil War in America. They want to fight us on every hill, on every corner, at every house, for every inch and every scrap of land. Their answer is when they see a black person who's upwardly mobile show up, the answer is no! Stop him! It doesn't matter what he wants. Stop him! Say no! As Michelle Alexander said that Nixon's hatchet men put out, we understand that the problem is the blacks. And the goal is to engineer a system that recognizes this problem while appearing not to. As long as you don't say that the problem is the blacks, then everybody can sit there and pretend that even though the only people we're gunning down, the only people we're shooting, the only people that we're working to economically disenfranchise are black people, as long as we don't say that, then there's enough jigaboons in black society who'll just play along because their goals in life are very small. But for those of us who want ownership, control, and something to pass down to our children, our standards are much higher, our requirements are much larger, and that's why they want to try to demonize that now. Case in point, what's happening in Georgia at this time. If you want to see reality turned on its ear, you all thought the hypocrisy from white supremacy couldn't get any worse when Sarah Palin's daughter turned up pregnant. Professor Truth, why don't you tell them all what's happening in Georgia right now?
What's going on is that Tyler Perry is attempting to expand his media footprint. He's planning a $100 million expansion on the grounds of the old, unused Fort McPherson. Now, for those of you who don't know, Fort McPherson is an Army base. And while Tyler Perry was talking with Kasim Reed, the current mayor of Atlanta, he had to make his case to the Atlanta City Council and also to the good folks in East Point, Georgia. And wouldn't you know it, there were objections. Now, who could object to a bunch of sound stages being built? The white folks just predictably. As far as they were concerned, there was a problem. The problem was they didn't like how the sound stages would change their quiet, peaceful, serene neighborhood. So the Army base with the tanks and the occasional demolition disposals, that means that you blow them up in place, and the thousands and thousands of soldiers on the big half-ton trucks, see, that didn't bother them. But a black man taking an unused Army base that is growing nothing but crabgrass and dilapidated former soldier housing, base housing, that bothers them. See, the excuses that they tried to use were as pathetic as they were predictable. They sat there and said, well, we feel better if what we were expecting was some housing to be built. Code for, we wanted for white suburban housing to be built. Because if somebody said affordable housing, that would say need more Negroes coming in. They have a problem with that. Then they tried to say that basically they didn't like how it would change the place. These people are insane. Because for God's sake, when Newt Gingrich was getting more money than any other politician outside of the federal system for Prince George's County, they didn't have a problem with that. They didn't have a problem with that at all. That was cool. But Tyler Perry comes along and says we're going to build some sound stages. Oh, this cannot be. This simply cannot be. So what's at the root of it? What's at the heart of it? What's at the heart of it is they do not want to have to come outside their homes and see a daily reminder that a black man is kicking their pale behinds economically. They don't want to see that. The same way when you come to a stoplight and some white guy in his old beater looks at you in your brand new Chrysler, he sits there and he seethes. As far as he's concerned, there's something wrong with that, and he wants to kill you because as far as he's concerned, you are showing him that his life and his existence has no purpose. So that's what's really going on here. The psychological game is going on here. And of course, the white media wants to put the proper spin on it. I mean, you had the Fox affiliate in Illinois, Channel 11, I believe, and they sat there, their headline, Tyler Perry buys Army base. He was only buying a portion of the old unused McPherson. He wasn't buying the whole freaking thing. But white supremacy puts out there that he's buying an Army base because they know the buttons that this will push in the minds of white people. They're going to see a black man allegedly buying an entire Army base, and the first thing comes to their minds is, the Negroes is rising. He's going to probably bring his Nubian army in to stop the white military in Ferguson. That's the buttons being pushed. White supremacy knows how to properly frame the issue, how to distort it. They know the buttons to push, and they're hitting them hard. Now, as black people, we seem to have this idea that apparently all of this is happening in a vacuum somewhere, and that this is just a series of misunderstandings by people who just don't know us very well. Kevin Sorbo knows you very well. In fact, after the success of that little indie film that he was in, God's Not Dead, where he plays a stereotypical atheist professor, he then announced that he was going to do a crowdfunding so as to produce a story about an abortionist in Philadelphia named Kermit Gosnell. Gosnell himself happens to be a person of color. You can barely tell, but the guy does happen to be one of those octoroons or quadroons. Now, there's God knows how many abortionists he could have chosen to demonize, but he decided Kermit Gosnell was going to be his target. Just another coincidence, I suppose. Now, where is all this going? Where it's going is to the inevitable conclusion that we have been telling you about here for years. White supremacy is on the march. And as black people, the choice is no longer between freedom and captivity. The choice is going to be victory or death. There will be no sidelines. There will be no fallback position. And there's not going to be a compromise. You cannot compromise with a group of people who have already declared that the only thing they want is you gone. That's what the right wing said when they were sitting here fighting Obama on his healthcare initiative. They were sitting there saying the president thinks that that defunding Obamacare is going to be a declaration of war. He doesn't realize that is our compromise. That's what we're up against. We are up against zero tolerance for black people in any shape, form, or fashion. Or has it skipped your notice that as America has become less white, the media has become more white? You go to any hospital in America, and you'll see mostly Asians as the staff. But you wouldn't know it by watching American television, particularly America's dramas. Every medical drama still has mostly white people. Since they see themselves declining in numbers across the board, they are trying to create a dream world through their media that they can take refuge in. But that's only one part of the equation, because the other part of the equation is, as they have this dichotomy between what they wish could be and what really is, they're going to decide to use force in the real world to make the dream world real again. That's what you're seeing in Ferguson. 150 years ago, they were saying that a black man had no rights that a white man was bound to respect. And they're now going forward with it. And while we're on the subject of Ferguson, there's this guy named Captain Johnson who went to the church. Apparently he's part of the highway patrol or what have you. I don't really care what he's part of, but he's their token Negro who they put out there. And his job was to say a few conciliatory and sympathetic words. I've got a black child. Well, hell, you're a black man. I sincerely hope you do. But in the end, he didn't sit there and say that there is a through line here. Trayvon Martin, Jordan Russell Davis, Renisha McBride, Michael Brown. Black teenagers being bumped off, being murdered, and white people saying, I felt threatened. The white trash who killed Jordan Russell Davis said that he was scared. That's why he had to get out of his car, walk more than 15 yards to another vehicle, gun in hand, shoot some kids, and then drive away because he felt scared, because he was the one who felt scared. And the scumbag who murdered Renisha McBride, he felt scared. That's why he didn't call the cops. That's why he grabbed his gun and went outside, because he felt scared. He was so scared that he had to go outside and start a fight, gun in hand. And the media knows the part that they've played in sitting here giving these guys their narrative. Even the cops say the exact same thing. He made a furtive gesture. He made an overt move. I was afraid for my safety. I had to kill the nigger so as to protect myself and other innocent white people around me. This toxic brew of white supremacy on all fronts, through the media, through the government, through the educational system, and through the hand-picked, propped-up Negroes who are amongst us supporting this and running interference for it. This is what we're up against. And it's going to get worse. You think that Kevin Sorbo was taking shots at you? He's one of the reasonable Caucasians out there. He ain't flipped his lid. But in the next few years, you're going to see more of it. A lot more. Because as black empowerment is going to rise, and as the white numbers decline, then we will all become big targets. Right now, we're medium-sized targets. The same way that everybody knows someone who cancer has touched in their family, you're about to have a situation now where all of you will know someone who white supremacy's deadly violence is going to be touching. Ain't going to be no more of this, let's pull them over and harass them with stops. They are now enlisting every able-bodied white man, all hands on deck, gun in hand. We have all got to put the Negroes on notice. Now, why black people in particular? Why us? Simply put, white supremacy is an idea. And we've been telling you that for years. It is an idea. Before there even was the ethnographic term white, they were calling themselves Christians and a bunch of other terms that were meant to delineate Western Europeans of a certain mentality. Everyone else were infidels. Then, as this mentality spread and other Caucasians got on board, they started, as they first labeled black people as black, not as Africans, but black. Then they decided, hey, we got to solidify our support against fellow Caucasians. Hence, the term white came along. It's a political term. White supremacy is an idea. And like any idea, anyone can take part in it and stand for it. Some of the biggest white supremacists we've ever known were black people. Certain frauds come to mind. This is how white supremacy in the 19th century could sit there and say in one breath, Irish people are not white. There were signs up that said, no dogs or Irish allowed. And by the end of the 19th century, the Irish were white, as were the Germans. Benjamin Franklin once said that he didn't like the Germans. They were, quote, too swarthy for my tastes. Swarthy means olive-skinned. He was saying this about the Germans. Funny, because Benjamin Franklin, like the rest of the founders of the U.S., were Anglo-Saxons. That meant that they were Germans themselves. But this is how crazy white supremacy is. In the 20th century, you had the Southern Europeans, like the Spanish, the Greeks, and the Italians, who were coming into the United States. And white supremacy was beating up on them and telling them, you're not on the team. You can't be on the team. By the time World War II came to a close, they said, okay, the Italians, the Greeks, and the Spanish, they're on the team now, because they've proven that they're willing to be down with it, which they did. And that's how the process works. White supremacy beats up or slaps around their intended recruits. And the only way that they'll let up on you is you got to sign on to the devil's bargain. White supremacy, the idea, the evil idea. Well, there's only one small problem. You can't recruit everyone on the team. And white supremacy, if you're going to sit here and say white is supreme, supremacy cannot exist in a vacuum. It requires something to magnify itself against. God could not be God if he was alone, and he could not be God if everything in the universe was equal to him. He can only be supreme when he has entities of lower power, angels, mankind, the creatures and beasts of the field. Then God is God, because he's supreme. He's vastly superior to all of them. Same thing goes for white supremacy. The white man cannot be supreme in a vacuum. He requires someone that he can compare himself to and say, see, this is who I'm supreme in comparison to. Black people can never be on team white supremacy. The only thing that we can do is overthrow it if we decide that's what we're going to do. And that is the reason why they are never going to let up on you. They cannot. You are the entity that they have made themselves supreme over. If you have anything even resembling power, then they are no longer supreme. And that is the glue that has held the European together for the last half millennium. It was the only idea powerful enough to pull them out of the Dark Ages. The Dark Ages began with the collapse of the Roman Empire, and it really solidified with the Moorish invasion of Europe. When the Africans, with a group of Arabs in tow, because the Africans came northward first, They formed a wall that kept the European up in Europe. And as a result, the European began to cannibalize himself politically, economically, socially. All that plagues and stuff, that's what happened when the European was kept in his own lands. The famines, the wars of attrition, all that came to an end with the end of the Moorish occupation. And the European was looking for a way to unite the disparate tribes. And the idea was, we are Christians. Why? Because those Africans are Muslims. We're different from them. And taking a little bit of the political and ethnic chauvinism of the Romans and incorporating it into their own mentality, that's how you got the white. That's how you got Christianity, cum white supremacy that we see today. It was not a process. It was not an event. It was a process. But the foundation of that process is that the niggers are who we are superior to. I always planned to make a video that gave the ethno-etymology of the term infidel and its use. Starting with, I want to say, and I'm going to get the wrong guy, but I want to say that it was Pope Pius XVI, who was the one who said that you are authorized to reduce to servitude all infidel peoples. He was not talking about the Saracens. He was actually talking about the Africans, because that's the term that they use to describe the black people, infidels. Infidel means non-believer. And you can go to people like Queen Elizabeth during the time of Shakespeare. She was using the term infidel to describe black people. And you can even look at such white supremacist groups as the Calvinists, who, when they invaded southern Africa and finally took it over after the British Empire was collapsing in the late 19th century, they used the term Kaffir. Yes, Kaffir is used as an ethnic slur, but the thing to remember is the term Kaffir is a European term, and it has an orthodox meaning. It has a proper textbook meaning. It means infidel. The Dutch are Calvinists, and their invasion of southern Africa was promoted largely as a religious venture. So, from the time of the Dark Ages all the way up until the end of the 20th century, the European was using the term infidel to describe black people. The reason that I give this information to you, is you need to understand that the Europeans' love of religion did not come out of some spiritual purity. If that was the case, then Michelangelo never would have painted a lie on the roof of the Sistine Chapel, on the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel. The European was searching, scrambling for an idea that he could use powerful enough to unite his disparate warring tribes and be able to solidify them and unite them into a group. There was nothing that he could find until he developed the concept of white supremacy. But white supremacy couldn't get any fuel until he looked at the guys who were doing better than him, who were his exact opposites. So no, we have almost 1,000 years of this backward mentality going on. That's the reason why you see what you see in Ferguson. That's why Kevin Sorbo decided to take off the gloves. That's the reason why it's bad and it's going to get worse. Because at the end of the day, white supremacy has to crush you. You will never be on board with it. The Hispanic can pretend to be on board. You can look at Latin America and see what a basket case that is. The Hispanics will gladly get on board. The Asians will play their part. That's what the 20th century was about. It was about the Asians being given their part, their tier in white supremacy. But you can't. You never will. We have always been a political problem for white supremacy. Notice I said political problem, not a threat. They got the upper hand. They got the power. We're completely disorganized and powerless. We are a problem for white supremacy. No different than the Jewish problem for the Nazis. Go back and read your history. The Third Reich did not call the Jews. They didn't say the final solution to the Jewish threat. In fact, they didn't even say the final solution to the Jewish problem. They said the final solution to the Jewish question. The German always wanted to believe that he was superior. You have to go back and read about how the Teutonic people were abused by the Romans to get the genesis of that concept. There was a reason why the founders of the United States considered the Germans to be inferior on a variety of levels. The Germans always had an inferiority complex. That's where their love of harsh discipline came from. They wanted to show the other European powers that they were not the red-headed stepchildren, the backward sick man of Europe. They wanted to prove that by proving their discipline. And you could talk about guys like Otto Weininger. Look it up. Or Friedrich Nietzsche. Look it up. These guys went in heavy on the Jews. Why? Because as far as they were concerned, the Jews represented a non-Teutonic excellence within their own sphere, and the German couldn't stand it. In his book, Beyond Good and Evil, Friedrich Nietzsche said, tongue-in-cheek, that the German could learn a thing or two from the Jew. He was saying this in the late 19th century. And he said that what the German could learn was the craftiness, the cleverness, the slyness of the Jew. This is how they were talking about them. All that Adolf Hitler came along and did was to, militarize the anti-Semitism and vulgarize it slightly more than it already was. But the German never considered the Jew to be a threat. And that European doesn't consider you to be a threat to white supremacy, but he does consider you to be a problem to it. And the reason that you are a problem is you proved in Haiti and other places that white supremacy could be overthrown. You also proved that white supremacy was a lie as far as a moral system. That was how the European got other Europeans to sign on to it. He got his brethren to sign on to it by saying we are morally superior. And we enshrine it in our documents. We are moral people. But black people prove, nah, they ain't moral. They're just a bunch of well-dressed thugs. And the white supremacist system forced to confront that. He was forced to confront his own immorality and the fact that the people who he defined as savages proved not to be savages at all. They proved to be his moral superior. And then proved to be his superior, his physical superior in the 20th century. And as far as he was concerned, to hell with all of this, gonna test the idea of white supremacy. We're just gonna say it's superior. The Negro is inferior. We're going to enshrine it through military force, and that's that. And what has the response of black people been to this? Marching, demonstrating, we shall overcome. Overcome what? You're not overcoming anything unless you have moral clarity, unless you have intellectual clarity. You need to specify what and whom it is you're trying to overcome. What are you overcoming? You don't know, or you can't say it, or are you afraid to say it? Because you see, if you think that you're going to have a seat at the table of white supremacy, if you think that some of those good white folk that you see on TV like you, like Kevin Sorbo, Mel Gibson. Mel Gibson must like black people. Why? He made 4 movies with a black man. If you think that these people like you, then what's going to happen is you will always be hesitant to call them on the carpet when they do wrong. You will immediately go into denial. Oh, we're all God's children. All white people ain't like that. Yeah, Michael Richards wasn't like that. The LAPD ain't like that. The NYPD ain't like that. Amadou Diallo, Sean Bell, Eric Garner, these guys were all just unfortunate coincidences. That's what happens when you have convinced yourself of a lie. Jason said it best in his video talking about Republican fear of a black. The problem with ideology is you believe something not because you know it to be true, but because it's your habit. So if you're campaigning for a slot on the team of white supremacy, then you are going to completely rationalize their abuses against you. And it doesn't matter how many Trayvon Martins, Renisha McBrides, or Michael Browns I pile up for you. I could bring you the brutalized corpse of Jordan Russell Davis, and you will find a way to rationalize it away. I could show you Kevin Sorbo sitting here beating a black child to death, and you would sit there and say, well, he probably has a mental disorder. No. No, black empowerment is never going to have a place for people who look back at Sodom and Gomorrah and want a place on the team. We are not trying to become part of somebody else's machine. We are fighting to build our own. We are not trying to have some ridiculous United Colors of Benetton ad. What we are trying to do is to look in the mirror, see an entire nation of black people, and love what we see. Not just be comfortable with looking at a sea of black faces, but to look at that and to swell with pride for it. There's nothing wrong with that. Hispanics say brown pride, and they ain't talking about the Afro-Latinos. They're only talking about those mestizos. They say that, and that's cool. And I'm looking at the Asians. The Asians are sitting there putting AZN or Asian on everything. And that's cool. And white people have defined white as being a de facto normalcy. They are a minority on the planet, but they define everything that isn't white as being black this, black that. See, everybody is able to be comfortable with their color and their ethnicity and their own, ethno-exceptionalism, if I may coin a term. But black people, when we do that, that's a threat. Sound stages are not a problem in New Orleans. They're not a problem in Shreveport. They're not a problem in Detroit. They're not a problem in New York. In fact, they're not even a problem in Atlanta unless a black man owns them. Then all of a sudden it becomes a problem. Now, I have my issues with Tyler Perry, but at the end of the day, Tyler Perry, I got to give the guy credit where it's due. He's one of the smartest guys working in media today because he owns his own equipment. It's a self-contained operation, and he's depending on no one but himself if he ever cuts the line with Lionsgate. I think that perhaps Tyler Perry is looking and realizing that Lionsgate has jettisoned him. Now that Lionsgate has had a taste of true success with the Hunger Games, they're looking at Tyler Perry and saying, we want to get off the Chitlin circuit. And Tyler Perry is now weighing his options. We'll see if Tyler Perry gets his head right. But even though Tyler Perry has been the patron saint of 21st century minstrel shows, even that isn't good enough for white supremacy. A minstrel is supposed to sit there and coon and buffoon. He's not supposed to be sitting there trying to take control of the means of production. And that's what Tyler Perry's doing with his sound stages. He's building a legitimate studio. He will have control of the means of production, not an imprint where he's sitting here renting territory on someone else's back lot. He wants to own it lock, stock, and barrel for himself. That's a threat. That is a threat because that's an economic venture. And that's what the white residents who said they didn't want him building sound stages, that's what they really object to. A perpetual reminder that a black man's doing better than them, and they got to walk outside and see these huge sound stages and know that a black man owns them. And all they got is their little house that they can't even afford to sell because they're already upside down and underwater. And the same, by the way, Tyler Perry's not alone. Will Smith is trying the same thing, except the difference is white supremacy. Will Smith did not put an infrastructure in place to insulate himself. That's the difference between him and Tyler Perry. Tyler Perry's putting an infrastructure in place to insulate himself. Will Smith sat there and decided that he was going to tip his hand. He went to Asia and started campaigning to these Asian studios and these Asian government officials in China and such. because Will Smith knew that one of the biggest lies that was told by white studios is that black actors just aren't popular overseas. Well, that we can't release a black movie internationally because, well, it's the racism of other people, mind you. Now, there is a nugget of truth in that. Sure, there's racism in Asia. There's racism in Latin America. Racism in Western Asia, called the Middle East. Sure. But nobody's more racist than the American white man. He's got the patent, the copyright, and the freaking trademark on bigotry. Anything we encounter in Asia could not possibly be worse than what we've already faced right here in the good old US of A. But Will Smith sat there and decided that he was going to try to do an end run around the Hollywood talking point that the problem is that black movies just don't sell in Asian territories. White people saw this, and next thing you know, here comes the whisper campaign. Will Smith's career is over. Why doesn't he work with big directors like Spielberg? Will Smith is a middle-of-the-road actor. Has Will Smith's star begun to fade? They were saying that about him 8 years ago when he started his little initiative to push his son Jaden and to sit there and do an end run around the movie studios in Asia. That's why when Men in Black 3 came out, I sat there and said they're going to be attacking this right out of the gate. They're going to attack it just when they hear about it. And sure enough, when they heard about it, do we really want another Men in Black movie? Isn't this franchise showing its age? That's just when they heard about it. After Earth, oh, he's working with M. Night Shyamalan. Oh, this movie's going to suck. Yeah, they're going in on Will Smith. They made him, and now they're breaking him. And Will Smith never seemed to understand that by not cultivating a support system with other black actors, by him deciding that he was going to be, that he thought he had some sort of favored Negro status, he never understood that he was also going out there alone. He didn't even have a proper infrastructure in place. So the result of it was, yeah, he made the Karate Kid for his son, but as far as the white supremacist powers are concerned, if they decapitate Will Smith, it won't matter what his kid does. So that's what they're now doing. Most bankable movie star on the planet, they used to say. Yeah, when he proved that he was willing to go along and that he wasn't going to upset the apple cart. See, Will Smith is a prime example of a black man who is not a threat, but he was a problem. And they have now dealt with their problem. That's just one black man who proved himself to be too uppity for his own good. What are they going to do when intelligent black society starts stepping hard? Because that's what's going on here. There is a new idea that has come back into vogue. And we are defining it as intelligent black society. And the vanguard of this movement is the B-1 Brigade. The reason that we use pseudo-military terms is because at the end of the day, we are at war. It is a war. And all wars are going to be won or lost based on two factors: the organization of the army fighting the war and the economic foundation of the army fighting the war. There was no reason why the American Yankee should have beaten the American redneck in the Civil War. All the good commanders were in the South. Most of the battles took place on Southern territory. The South had the home court advantage. And yet, the American redneck lost to the American Yankee. Why was that? Because the American Yankee had the ability to hire mercenaries from Europe. He had the ability to incentivize more Yankees to go south and fight in the war. And he had an economy that was far stronger. The industrial North was far stronger than the agrarian South. And that was what won the war. It wasn't a matter of who had the smartest army. It was a matter of which army was better fortified. And all military fortifications begin with the economy. How long can you stay in this war? How long can you fight it? You can go back to Sun Tzu's The Art of War, and he talked about that. He said that the farther the military goes from home, the more money it costs. So you better have an idea of how much money you're willing to give to your war effort before you even begin. Because a military that has no money is also a military that has no chance. Hell, if you have no money, you can't even train your army. That explains why white supremacy has a disciplined phalanx of well-armed, well-trained goons in full riot gear with armored personnel carriers and M60 machine guns on top. And the black army is a bunch of shirtless teenagers throwing rocks. It looks just like Israel, doesn't it? The Palestinians are hurling rocks and the Israelis are shooting missiles. And you wonder why it is that the Palestinians are being driven from their own land. And that no one can seem to do anything about it. The first thing that the Jew did was he solidified his economy. When the Jew decided that he needed to have land, he had Jewish businessmen plead his case with the American and British governments. When it came time for the Irgun and other paramilitary Jewish radicals to go into Palestine, they were well armed and well trained, and they have been well armed and well trained by Jewish businessmen in the U.S. and Europe. Where do you think that they got the machine guns from, and the grenades from, and the mortars from, and their military training from? It was the Jewish economy that gave them their Jewish state. Every successful army builds its economic strength first, then they go looking for a fight. Don't believe me? Look at Japan. In the 19th century, the Japanese did not have as strong an economy as the European did. So he started building his economy. And by the time the turn of the 20th century came, the Japanese was ready to fight the European. He won his war with the Russians, the Russo-Japanese War. He won it in spectacular fashion and in record time. He crushed the Russians first at Port Arthur and then the Straits of Tsushima. The Japanese got their economy in order first. So by the time the 1930s came around and the Japanese was like, I'm ready to expand into China, the Europeans said, you can't do that. We have a open door policy in China. Go watch my video series about racist Asians hating blacks if you want the backstory on that. The European had a open door policy. And the Japanese said, we're going to slam that door shut. So the Japanese went into China. And when he went in, it was the power of his economy that gave him the ability to walk away from the League of Nations. The Europeans set up the League of Nations to be his official rubber stamp committee for who can have wars of aggression and who cannot. That is all the League of Nations was meant to do. It was meant to regulate imperialism. The Japanese looked and said, we don't like the game, we don't like the rules, and we sure as hell don't like who we have to play with. We're out of this. They walked out. And the European could do nothing about it. There was one weakness that the Japanese had, however: oil. The European controlled that. Japan has no oil reserves. So when the Japanese lost the Second World War, the first thing that they did was they decided that they were going to retool their military. But this time it would be different. Rather than trying to fight the European from without, he decided, I'm going to get my hooks deep in that European. I am going to insert a poison blade between his ribs. And I'm going to stick this thing in so deep that the European will have no choice but to accept my economic rise. The Japanese did not sit there and say, let the European rule us. He didn't sit there and form a circular firing squad, but he did purify his society of individuals who wanted to do that. There were a number of assassinations that took place in Japan during the 1920s and 30s. You had a group of Japanese called the Super Patriots, is what they called them. They assassinated, I believe it was 2 prime ministers in a row almost, and other members of the Japanese military who did not go along with what the new movement was, Dai Toa, the New Order in Asia. But what the European doesn't tell you is that after the Second World War, there was a second bloodletting, almost as bad, in the 1950s. Now, I forget the name of the man in particular. I think he was a prime minister, but he got assassinated live on air. A young man came out and he had one of those dagger blades, about a foot long. He rushed at that guy hard as he could. With that blade, it almost went through him. And the guy was dead. I think it was the prime minister. I forget his name, but he was dead before he hit the floor. That happened live on air. Now, that was the one that got coverage, but there were many others that did not. What was happening was the Japanese, who were determined to keep their sovereignty and keep their and be able to keep their autonomy, they were purging those elements within their group who didn't get it. And starting in the 1960s with machine tools, the Japanese began to rise again. Then in the 1970s with televisions, and in the 1980s with automobiles and consumer electronics. Today, Japan is one of the top economies in the world, number 2 or number 3, depending on what day of the week it is. But the Japanese did not sit there and decide that they were going to tolerate dissident elements amongst them, and they were not looking for a way to be part of the European economic machine. You go to Japan, and it is all Japan all the time. You go to other places and you see bilingual signs. You go to Japan, you don't really see them. You go to other places and you find a certain critical mass of people who speak English. In Japan, they don't mind speaking English, but they do it for cultural. They do it more for cultural reasons, but they don't do it for political reasons. They do it because there's a group of Japanese who like the idea that they can understand what you say, but you cannot understand what they say. Now, as black people, why don't we do that? That's not a rhetorical question. It's a challenge. You need to look at yourself and say, I want to be in charge. You need to look at the Negroes around you who don't get it and see them the same way that the Japanese saw their own recalcitrant elements. Oh, you're not on board? Okay, fine then. As Jason said, they are food. Find something to sell them and then dump them where you found them. These Negroes cannot take us anywhere, and hence they will go nowhere. And what will happen is you're going to have black men who get it. Black men who understand that they cannot and should not be part of the white economic political machine. So what will happen is those black men are going to reach out to each other the same way that the Japanese did. Japanese economic strength was not just the result of a from the top down movement. The Japanese businessmen did that on their own. They created organizations like the Kairetsu and the Zaibatsu. These are amalgamations of businesses. I mean, and they're big too. I mean, you had the Kairetsu, everything from your local chain of laundromats all the way up to Mitsubishi Motors. The Japanese businessmen organized themselves. They did not sit there and say, let's see if the government will get its act together. They didn't sit there and say, let's see if white supremacy will stop trying to take us over. And they didn't sit there and say, let's see if we can get the guys who want to kiss white people's behinds to get on the team. They said, no. The businessmen who get it, the businessmen who understand will unite. And those who don't will perish. And that is how the Japanese built their strength. They built their own economic machine for their own benefit, and they were totally unapologetic about it. To this day, you got white people whining and complaining about Japanese economic protectionism. They sound a lot like black people in the U.S. They could not find a way to beat the Japanese economically, so they hope to shame the Japanese into opening their doors to white supremacy. And the Japanese said, nah, last time we opened our doors to you was with Matthew Perry's invading fleet in the 1870s, and we ain't doing that again. The Japanese learned from their mistakes. When are you going to learn from yours? There is no place on the team of white supremacy for you. There will not be. You represent an inherent indigenous threat to white supremacy. You prove what a lie that it is. And if you get power, then you have proven that white supremacy has failed. And the European has no backup philosophy. He doesn't have anything else that can unite his people. He has nothing else no other idea that could act as a strong enough engine for European prosperity. So he has no choice but to keep you under his iron heel. He has no choice but to brutalize you. He has no choice but to eventually get rid of you, because you are not going to stand there and be killed. Well, you won't stand there, but the question is, how good of a fight can you put forward? Throwing rocks at the local militia in Ferguson ain't going to cut it. What you need is your own army. And they need to be trained, they need to be supplied, they need to be motivated, and they need to be ready. One of the main problems as black men is we are not ready to go into a fight and die. We're not. We're not. All some redneck has to do is just fire a shot in the air and we all scatter because everybody's scared to die. They fire a shot. First of all, you shouldn't be waiting for them to fire the first shot. The honor of the first shot should be yours. Most military engagements are won by the side that fires the first shot. That's how the Japanese beat the Russians at Port Arthur. It was a preemptive strike. They hit the Russians while they were still in port. Sounds just like Pearl Harbor, don't it? The Japanese understood that he who hits first has taken the initiative and can strike the killing blow. And it's the same thing that the Europeans in America realized with the British. They were already striking blows against the British, tarring and feathering Tories, dumping tea at Boston Harbor. That was economics. The colonials had fired the first shots, not the British. So when you sit there and see a group of militia in front of you, you don't merely tell a bunch of black men get together. You tell them, get our steel, and we're going to surround these bastards. And we're not surrounding them for the sake of taking prisoners. We're surrounding them for the sake of making a point, to let them know our army can beat your army. The Jews did not wait to see what was going to happen with the Arabs in the 1940s. The Jews struck the first blow. The King David Hotel stood testament to that. They blew that sucker up. They struck the first blow. So the point that I'm trying to make is, as black people, we have this pathetic idea taught to us by Europeans that, well, it's dishonorable to strike the first blow. That's funny because that's the same European who said that all is fair in love and war. No. As black men, we got to start taking the initiative. We do not wait for our enemy to bring the fight to us. That's what Dr. John Henrik Clarke taught. You better take the fight to him before he decides to bring the fight to you. When you look at Ferguson, you see what happens when you wait for the enemy to bring the fight to you. He gets to hold his position and shoot tear gas at you, and he gets to beat and club your women and children, and he gets to point M60 machine guns at you and tell the whole world what you're going to do about it. That's what happens when you take the initiative. You should not in any shape, form, or fashion wait for the enemy to come to you. That means he's got the advantage. He's on offense, you're on defense. That's a recipe for losing. That's a recipe for an invading army to take over. Don't believe it? Look at what the Germans did. Blitzkrieg, lightning war. The Germans didn't wait for the Poles to put up barricades. They said we're going into Poland first, and they did. They did not wait for the French to surrender. They shot across the Rhine and took France in record time. The Germans understood if you want to win a fight, you better hit first. He who hits first usually is the only guy who gets in a hit. The American army went into Iraq with shock and awe. They didn't sit there and say, let's give the Iraqis a fair fight. They said, to hell with that fair fight stuff. We're hitting the Iraqis hard as we can, and that's exactly what they did. And that's the reason why the U.S. military now has more bases in Iraq than any other country that the U.S. has occupied. They took Iraq in record time. As black men, you better get over this idea that white people are going to be okay with you if you just show them that you mean no harm. Michael Brown died with his hands in the air. Amadou Diallo died with his hands in the air. Eric Garner died with his hands up. So no, there is no posture that you can take that will keep white supremacy from killing you. That is, unless your posture is one with you holding a rifle, holding an assault rifle. If your posture is one with you holding a gun, that'll stop white supremacy. But understand something. Where I'm from, you don't cock a brick. You throw it. You don't have the guns as a deterrent. The gun is your solution to white violence. Your economy is your solution to white supremacy. But when white supremacy shows up deciding that they're going to go ahead and kill a few of you so they can put the fear of the white man into you, your gun will be the only protection that you got. Because once you go ahead and show them that you're willing to put some of them in the ground, that will make them think twice. What was that guy's name? Michael Dorner, I think it was, or Eric Dorner, who basically...
I think it was Chris Dorner.
Chris Dorner. He was mistreated by the LAPD, and he was not a thug, by the way. I look at the brothers who have decided to do a one-man uprising against white supremacy, like the brother who did up in Washington or Seattle or whatever it was. These were not thugs. These were intelligent black men, educated black men who put in 40 and 50-hour weeks. The brothers who actually decide to strike a blow against police brutality are not the thugs. See, thugs are basically the white supremacist occupation army within the black community. The same way that the Judenrat were the Germans' occupation army inside the Jewish community, and the same way that the civil rights retreads are white supremacy's occupation group inside of our political structure, that's what the thugs represent in our community. These are the individuals who are propped up and supported by white supremacy. Section 8 housing, welfare, food stamps, WIC, SSI. White supremacy will feed, clothe, and house them. They have billions of dollars to support their occupation army within our midst. But you ain't going to find a dime coming to you from the Small Business Administration. Know that. So if you think that the thugs can be turned into an army, even cannon fodder, you are crazy. The thugs will run at the drop of a hat. If a white man comes into a room full of thugs, all he has to say is clear out, and they will do it. The only black men who will stand up to white supremacy are the intelligent amongst us. Thugs will never build an economy. They'll stand out in front of the local Foot Locker and think that they're proving something. They're waiting for the cameras to show up. Ooh, all these Negroes in front of the Foot Locker. They'll brag about their brand new LeBrons. They'll brag about their brand new rims on a car that's 30 years old. But when you sit there and say, man, you just spent $5,000 on rims, Ever thought about building a business? You let me do me, you do you. I can think of no other group of people who do that. I could not see some Hispanics coming up to each other saying, hey, Vato, you put new rims on that old 86 Cutlass. You should open up a store, Holmes. You do that in the Hispanic community and they'll say, man, he's right. And in the Asian community, they don't even need to be shamed into economic empowerment. The Hispanics showed up to build an economy, and the Asians showed up to dominate that economy. It's only among the blacks, it's only among the Africans in America that you find people who pride themselves on what they can buy. Not on what they own, what they can buy. And that is the reason why Ferguson is happening. That's the reason why Kevin Sorbo feels that he can sit there and run you into the ground with impunity. Because at the end of the day, they know that they have a white economy that is backing them up. Kevin Sorbo is economically insulated. Even if white people weren't down with his racist rhetoric, at the end of the day, he's got enough money on his own where he can afford to talk trash. He doesn't need to make another movie. He's going to live off residuals from his crappy TV show and his even crappier movies that he's been in. He's going to live off that the rest of his days. So he can speak his mind. Ain't that what Umar Johnson said? As black people, we've become cowardly because we can't speak our minds. Because we're depending on the people who oppress us for our daily bread.
You know, one more thing about that guy. If you'll all remember, about 10 years ago, the reason why he disappeared was because Kevin Sorbo had a stroke. He had a debilitating stroke. Kevin Sorbo, that was the reason why he had disappeared for so long. And you didn't see him for like a good 10 years. Now, most people, because his almost killed him. He had a serious one. Although there's no such thing as a minor stroke, but you know, you would think that when a person faces a life or death situation like that, their life flashes before their eyes, they realize how fragile and finite life is. And I'm a firm believer that however a person comes out of an experience like that, that type of experience will bring out the best in them. That when they have a chance to see their life actually end, they realize that every day is a gift. And it's another chance to express what you really feel is important. And I submit to you that what he said this week, that was about the best Kevin Sorbo is going to get. I think that's a very interesting thing for people to consider, Brother Truth.
Absolutely. When a man stares eternity in the face and realizes that he's about to go the way of all flesh, when he gets that second chance, and everybody who's been through that knows it, when he gets that second lease on life, then he's going to speak from his heart after that because he realizes this is all I got. And Kevin Sorbo's talking to you. He's telling you that he can't stand your black ass and that he has hated you for a long time. Do you believe that Kevin Sorbo just woke up yesterday and saw black people uprising in Ferguson and said, oh, what animals? You think that just popped into his head? No more than when Mel Gibson said that he hoped that his wife got raped by a pack of niggers. That's where these guys are coming from. And these are the guys who are in charge of the society that you live in. They decide what you see and what you don't see. Kevin Sorbo is trying to put together his own little media venture. God's Not Dead. He looked at that and said, well, hell, if a bunch of nobodies could put together something, I used to play Hercules on a crappy show. I'm pretty sure I could do it. They're all trying to put together their own media ventures, and look what they're doing with their media. They are going to crush you with their economy, and they are going to silence you and demonize you and send out the clarion call to exterminate you with their media. You cannot afford to sit idle while this is going on. You cannot afford to go through this life without some media real estate. You can't. You cannot afford to go through this life without some economic power. And you certainly can't afford to go through this life thinking that all you have to do is put in a 9 to 5, 40 hours a week. That day's coming to an end. All of it's coming to an end. And the only thing that will be left is the reality of empowerment. Either you'll have it or you won't. If you've got it, then what's going to happen is you will have to show the powers that be that they have pushed you around for the last time. You will have to engage, close with, and beat those forces where they stand. An organized and well economized army can do that. But a struggling group of protesters in the streets cannot do that. You protested against getting thrown out of your houses in the 60s, 70s, and 80s and 90s when gentrification was running wild. How many of you did that spare? After Hurricane Katrina, the denizens of New Orleans protested all of the higher income housing being built and the fact that the city couldn't even let the citizens back into their own neighborhoods. How far did that get you? It is going to be your economy that is going to decide whether or not you win. Don't believe it? Look at Tyler Perry. All these white folks saying, we don't like this nigger coming into our neighborhood, and he's going to shame and embarrass us. You know, back in my day, Fort McPherson wouldn't let niggers on the base, and now this nigger's going to buy a huge part of it. That's what's going through white people's minds. They hate it, but they can't do anything about it. Because Tyler Perry got his economics in order first. See, in Detroit, where they have a far higher black population than in Atlanta, they don't even have a grocery store owned by black people. That's why the Arabs sit there and decide if you get to eat or not. And now the whites are saying you don't even get to have a drop of water to drink. That's what happens when you have no economy. They slap you around, punch you around, they can do what they want to you. But if you do have an economy, you got some economic wherewithal, then even a black man can walk into a good old boy enclave and call hands. That, you know what you call that, folks? You call that empowerment. He gets to decide where he goes and what he does when he gets there. They can object, but they can't do anything about it. Now, Tyler Perry is one man, and he is misguided in his own way. But you can't deny the fact that his example works. Tyler Perry did not go to white people when it came time for him to build his little would-be media. He went to black people, black women in specific. He went to black churches to get his audience. He went to black enclaves to build his viewer base, so that when Lionsgate funded Diary of a Mad Black Woman, he already had the infrastructure in place. He didn't have to ask where his audience was coming from. He already knew. And then he let that audience know, I want to do more. And they said, do more. So he went ahead and kept building. And he kept growing. And the result of that is what you see today. A black man with power in the world of media. Not a lot, but enough where he doesn't have to worry about a bunch of good old boys and girls objecting. They are meaningless. Tell me something. Can you do that? Can you do that?
I'll tell you one major reason why that doesn't happen, brother. One of the major reasons why is what you explained earlier. When you pointed out that this question of morality and being moral that this has been a problem for a while now. This double standard of holding black people to things like that. And I suggest to you that that is one of the major problems at the heart of our difficulties. Who are you? What are you? What do you stand for? What motivates you? What brings you together? Is there something worth fighting for and dying for? Or are you a person without a core? Are you a person who has no core beliefs, no core principles, no core standards, no core character? Are you just a person who can watch flags being raised and little babies being killed, and you sit there laughing just the same? We as black people have become inconsequential in our own minds, to the point that we no longer need to be told to be inferior. We have actually adopted inferiority as simply being us. Who are you when you see somebody mock Marcus Garvey, insult Dr. Francis Cress Welsing, and spit on Dr. John Henry Clark, hurl barbs at Malcolm X? When you see everything that your people are being assaulted, what is the proper response supposed to be? And I'm telling you all that that is why things like what we do. And that is why a concept like Black Nuremberg, understand something, people. Kevin Sorbo is making the kinds of comments that he's making because Sorbo knows how many Sambos there are. Sorbo can see your Sambos. And that's why he feels emboldened to say the kinds of things he's saying. Your citizens' councils, which is basically what they are, in Georgia, trying to push back against Tyler Perry, and for what? They understand. They are looking at you and they see you as weak, and they know that this is the moment and the hour. That if they don't finish the unfinished business of slavery now, then it don't happen. When you are done with a tool, when that tool can no longer serve you, you are to discard it. We were tools of servitude. We no longer serve that function. We are obsolete. But we have not been discarded. And that is the unfinished business of slavery. That's the thing that never got finished being dealt with. The discarding of the former tools of servitude. And there are many ways that that plays itself out. When they destroy your history, destroy your character, mock your gods and prophets and priestesses, slander you, speak against you, cultivate traitors within your midst, and they check to see how you are going to respond to that. And I want to ask you all tonight, how many of you, if you are not enraged by what you've seen, then I tell you that you are worthless. How can you sit there and let somebody spit on our icons, mock Malcolm, mock Dr. Welsing, mock Dr. Ben, mock Dr. John Henry Clark? You sit there and let them smear our icons? This is why the white people respect the Muslim. They respect the Arab, because if you tried that with their icons, he's coming at you with a blade. He's coming at you with weapons. He's coming at you with his fists. He's throwing his shoes. He knows it won't kill you, but he is letting you know that he is not simply going to sit there and take it. And they respect him because he does not allow that to happen. Even if he knows that he cannot win the fight, he knows that he has saved his soul and his self-respect. And he would prefer to die with his honor intact than to live knowing that he didn't defend his icons, that he did not defend his legends, that he did not defend his own integrity. He would rather die before he lets that happen. And if there is a hell, every single one of you who have refused to stand up, you will burn in it. Because you watched these things occur. You watched us go down. You sat there laughing and giggling while things that were absolutely not funny were going on. When Neely Fuller said that black people have been conditioned to laugh at things that are serious and be silly about things that are serious and serious about things that are silly. And I'm saying that every one of you who laughs those kinds of things off, who looks at our poverty, curls your lips to question whether white supremacy exists because you want to laugh for another 30 minutes, life ain't no damn sitcom. And black people want to treat the whole damn world and every day of their existence as if it's a frickin' sitcom. Just a TV show to be watched. And the people who are out here killing you ain't watching no TV. It is a game of numbers, and every one of you that they knock off, that is another bloodline killed. Don't you know that they killed Michael Brown's bloodline, Trayvon Martin's bloodline, Jordan Russell Davis's bloodline? They killed them. These are people, they didn't even have any kids. Not any that we're aware of. When they kill young black people, they've snuffed out whole bloodlines. They are playing a game of numbers. And when your history is up for assault, when your icons are up for assault, when everything that makes you what you are as a people are up for assault, when they see that you don't care about your existence, that you don't care about your people, that you don't care about your lives, when they see that that's what you're on, when they see that that's what you're about, they're coming for you. They are coming for you. And you might think this is a game, and you might think that this is negligible, and you might sit up here and tell yourself that you don't have to do nothing. And I want to say, what kind of person are you? When you see these atrocities being committed against our people, everybody watches Malcolm X's movie and say that they would have stopped the gunman. You're a damn lie. Most of you would have sat there. First of all, most of you would not have been there. That's the first thing. Most of you would not have been there. Most of you would have been on the coon train. That's where most of you would have been. Most of you would have been riding with King Coon over there, and most of you would have been sitting at home. You would have been saying that Malcolm was just a troublemaking nigga. That's what you would have said. You would have said that Malcolm was just out there making trouble. And you'd be sitting at home saying, him, that tall, high, yelling Negro, all that damn pro-black stuff, all that pro-black, black power stuff. You'd have been saying the same things about Malcolm that you say about us today. You'd have been saying the same thing. You would have done nothing different. You were scared back then. Your parents were scared back then, and they're scared today, and you are scared today. And that's why there are so few of us. It is a damn shame that there are so few people who are at least standing up and raising their voices. If you aren't willing to strike against the enemies of Malcolm X and Marcus Garvey, what the hell are you living for? What in the hell are you living for? Black people are always trying to ignore their problems and then can't figure out why their problems never go away. I'll ignore it and it goes away. You've been told your whole damn life you cannot ignore your problems will never go away by ignoring them. But black people try to do that. Why? Because black people are scared. Black people are scared. And it's reached a point now that you all are scared of coons. You're scared of the Sambos and butt dancers. So what are you going to do? I want to know what the hell you're going to tell your children. I want to know what in the hell you plan on telling your children and your grandchildren. Or are you planning on looking them in the eye and lying to them the way that your parents and grandparents lied to you? You're going to lie to your kids and say that, oh, I was defending all these people the whole time. You didn't do a damn thing. Did not do a damn thing. When we talk about the immorality, black people have adopted that immorality as a cloak and a shield to hide and cower behind, to use as their excuse for never taking actions. Black people see themselves through the eyes of white supremacy, and that is why when some miserable bastard can sit up and make comments, whether it is a meme or not, that chick on Twitter, Kiki the hood rat, that mess she said about MLK, that's not funny. That's not a joke. Nicki Minaj and her insults, her mocking of Malcolm X at the end of his life, that's not a joke. The coon attacking Dr. Francis Cress Welsing, that's not a joke. These other people out here saying, so what about Dr. John Henry Clark and economic empowerment? My swag is on 5,000. That's not a joke. That's treason. That is treason against black people. That is treason against black history. That is treason against black society. And there is no arguing your way around that. And believe it or not, there are people who are trying to do so. And I am saying that if any of you sit here and let them get away with that, to hell with you. I want to know who's going to stand up for Malcolm. Who's going to stand up for Medgar? Who's going to stand up for Mandela? Who's going to stand up for Marcus Garvey? Who's going to stand up for Huey Newton? Who is going to stand for Betty Shabazz, Ida B. Wells, Harriet Tubman, Sojourner Truth, Fred Hampton? Who is going to stand for our icons today? Who's going to stand for their people today? Or are you sitting up here looking for another reason? Well, I'm not going to get involved. All you damn not going to get involved people, you are fellow travelers with the betrayers and traitors of black society. You are with them. You are with them. You are on board with all of them. I want to know who's going to go to war. I want to know who's going to fight them with everything you've got. You fight them with your words. You fight them with your thoughts. You fight them with your books. You fight them with your businesses. You fight them with your religion. You swing with everything. I want to know who's going to do that. I want to know who's going to load up, lock and load, strap on your armor, and who's going to take to the battlefield. That's what I want to know. I want to know who is going to find the adversaries of black society and say, take them all out. That's what I want to know. I want to know who wants to have the ability to walk into the Martin Luther King Museum and the Black History Museums and to walk in front of the huge portraits of our ancestors and icons and be able to hold your head high and say that I took up arms in your name when you no longer could. That I was the person who picked up the mantle when it was passed to me. And it was not easy to do it, but I did it because it was not easy. I didn't do it because it was easy. I did it because it was right. And I'm trying to find out tonight who out there is doing that. Or are you laughing and giggling with the coons and clowns? Is that you? That's what your life is? That's what you're going to tell your children? That's the way you lived? That's what we're going to chisel on your tombstone? I giggled in the face of white supremacy. I laughed along with white supremacy. That's going to be on a lot of your damn tombstones out there. A lot of you. And Kevin Sorbo, knows this. That is why he would dare to open his mouth against you. Mel Gibson knows this. That is why he would dare open his mouth against you. Paula Deen, Dog the Bounty Hunter, Imus in the Morning, Michael Richards. The list goes on. They know this. And that is why they feel free to speak against you. Because they look at our icons being desecrated by coons inside black society and killers outside black society. And they see no vigorous response from us. And that is why they say, fair game. We can get you now. Because you won't mount any type of defense. You're sitting ducks. That's why they feel they can do it. I want to know who's done laughing. I want to know who is dead damn serious. I want to know who's going to stand up for these people, because I am. I want to know who is going to make sure that you might speak against other people, but we are going to make Islamic Jihad look like Sunday school teachers if you speak against our icons. That's what I want to know. I want to know who is going to stand up for black, because there's a lot of people out there standing up against us. I want to know who's going to do that. I want to know who's going to look the enemy in the eye and do what the Jews did when they left Nuremberg and say, we will never let you forget who our enemies are. Don't you know that Jews are still fighting the Second World War? Did you know that? Do you realize that? They never stopped fighting it. You know why? Because they realized that the moment that they stop fighting World War II is the moment the Nazis make their comeback. That's what they realized. And I want to know, if you let them sit up here and desecrate our icons like they're doing right now, kill our children, destroy our people, annihilate our neighborhoods with us in them, if you do that now, then you are no damn good. You don't deserve to breathe. You have not justified your right to keep breathing. You said in the chat room, Nazi hunters, we need some coon hunters now. We need to find everybody who's out there laughing and giggling. If you insulted the Prophet Muhammad, do you all know, for those of you who do not understand, and Professor Black Truth can tell you all in depth about this, Professor Truth, in Islam, could you insult even the name of Muhammad, much less his face? Could you do that and get away with it?
Absolutely not. His name is sacrosanct. In fact, they show the signs that say death to those who insult Muhammad. They got laws about it.
You cannot even show or depict a picture. Did you all know that in Islam, it is considered blasphemy to even attempt to draw a picture of a illustration of the prophet? Did you all know that? A lot of you did not know that the reason that you have never seen a painting of him is because it is against Islamic law to even make an image of the prophet. I mean, that's that goes back to the Old Testament of make no graven image. Well, not even a picture of him. You are not to even attempt, not all these pictures of Caesar Borgia running around as Jesus Christ or the black Jesus or whatever. You couldn't even do that in Islam. Even if you had a photograph of the Prophet Muhammad, you would be restricted from being able to show it. That's just how seriously it is taken. And we got people here not just insulting the name of black people, but insulting their image. And you all are taking that as less of an offense than Muslims do of the prophet? I can tell you right now which one of you is going to be surviving in 100 years. One of you protects your name. The other one of you ain't even going to protect your people. And I'm not just talking about some dirty low-down folk out here. Your best and brightest. When you are a people who do not even recognize your icons, you are unworthy of existence because you are unworthy of them. You're unworthy of them. It is not a joke. Everybody who throws in their lot with the people, everybody who tries to rationalize that away. Could you imagine sitting in the mosque with Salman Rushdie or the nephew of that fashion designer ended up with a knife in his chest? What was his name? Was that Versace? I forget his name.
It's Van Gogh. It's one of Van Gogh's kids.
Ended up with a knife in his chest.
Theo Van Gogh. That was his name.
Found out the hard way that insulting Islam is serious business. They take it that seriously. Could you imagine somebody watching him sit up here and make cartoons mocking Muhammad with a bomb on top of his head? And could you imagine somebody saying, well, that's just his, sitting in the middle of the mosque saying that that's just his opinion? You know, I don't agree with everything he says, but I agree with some of it. After the prophet being shown with a bomb on his head, you're going to sit up here and try to defend him in any way? Really? Don't you know that if you tried that in the Middle East, what would happen? If you tried that anywhere other than black society, what would happen? I live in Louisiana. You try standing in front of the Texas Street Courthouse here in Shreveport and try burning a Confederate flag and see what happens to you. Not in Iran, not in Saudi Arabia, not in Yemen, not in Oman, not in Pakistan, not in Afghanistan. Shreveport, Louisiana. Go try that in Selma, Alabama. Go try that in Jackson, Mississippi. Go try it. Go try it and see what happens. You try that. Not overseas, but right here among white people, and see what becomes of you. They will do that for a flag, but black people will let Kevin Sorbo, police officers, coons on the internet, clowns on television, idiots on the radio speak against us every single day, slander our icons every single minute, and then you let their audiences sit there and clap like monkeys? And you sit there and accept that? What the hell has become of you as a people? Can you even dare to call yourself a people anymore if you allow that to go unpunished? You are just gonna let them say that and then just get up and walk away? Really? We should know every single one of them. We should be able to put a spotlight on every single one of them. Everybody everywhere should know exactly who they are. They should be like O.J. Simpson. They should be terrified to leave the house for people taking pictures of them. Everybody everywhere they go should know exactly who they are and remember what they did. That is why. If you want to know why the Jews have not had a second Holocaust, it is because they never let you forget about the people responsible for the first one. That's why they have never had a second one. And I'm telling you all right now, tonight, this is no laughing matter. This is no laughing matter. White supremacy is taking their blades out. But we got black folk who still want to dance and sing a jig. With people who are taking their blades out against us. I'm not laughing about this. I'm not joking about this. I'm not going to get up tomorrow morning and feel a little softer about this. I'm not looking for people who are rationalizing this. You cannot rationalize killing my child. You cannot show me the other side of murdering our elders. You cannot show me the bright side of raping our children. You can't show me that. It doesn't exist. There are no two sides of this. There is no sometimes it's okay and sometimes I agree with it. You are all the way in or you are all the way out. Every other group of people on the face of the planet have a concept of this and understand this. What about black people? What about black folk? We are the only people on earth who will sell out our lives for a laugh. Because attention is like currency to black people. We will sell our souls to get a laugh and a pat on the head. Damn you little insecure, emotionally deficient bastard children. I don't want a bunch of bastard babies sitting around me who've been raised by a television. I want men and women who are built for survival. Men and women who value who and what we are. That's what I'm looking for today. And if these other people will go to war for their profits and their religious icons, and you can't name any person that we will go to war for, at that point I say we have forfeited our right to exist. Professor Truth, I'll let you have the last word.
Every week when we congregate here, the B1 Brigade's War Council, the reason that we do it is because repetition is the mother of learning. I told you about a week ago that Rush Limbaugh was the mouthpiece for white supremacy, that the Republicans chose for their wing of the white supremacist machine, and he's been at it for dang near 30 years now. Because the bad guys understand that every time you say something, you ingrain it deeper. The bad guys understand that they're at war. The bad guys realize what they must do if they hope to win it. And that is why you are here. It better be why you're here. It better be why coonery and buffoonery is going to be on the endangered species list if the B1 Brigade has anything to say about it. And it's also the reason why, if you're not ready to fight, if you're not ready to go ahead and take up arms against the sea of troubles, as Malcolm put it, then what's going to happen is you're going to become roadkill. And when you do, don't expect anybody to sit there and say, oh, how terrible this happened to you. You could not be bothered to stand up for your people. Your people will not stand up for you. Black first.
It is one thing for those of us who are alive today to stand up and wonder where our people are. But when people who have bled and died for you are looking around and wondering what they bled and died and gave their lives for, that is blasphemy. And when we are watching, as Malcolm told you what to do when white supremacy took up arms, and Huey Newton told you what to do when they took up arms, and all of these people have prepared us and told us what to do, and we don't see them as worthy of defending, we don't see our children as worthy of defending, we don't see our mothers and sisters and daughters as worthy of defending, we don't see ourselves worthy of defending. I am telling you that that is treason. And I don't want any traitors around me. I want to know who's going to take the smile off the face of white supremacy. I want some dead-ass serious black people. And I want to know who is going to take the smile off the face of coonery and clowns and frauds and sellouts and bastard baby makers. Who lives every morning to get up and break the grin off their jaws? Who does that? I want to know who that is. I want to know who that is. And I want to know where you are. I want to know who's going to prove themselves worthy of the challenge of the 21st century. That's what I want to know. I want to know who is going to show themselves as worthy of confronting all these challenges that we find ourselves facing in the 21st century. Both the enemies from without and the enemies from within. Who's going to do that? Not just for ourselves, but for our ancestors and our children. Who's going to do that? Who's going to speak for them now? And if they're not worth going to war for, who is? And this concludes tonight's broadcast of the BlackChannel.net radio. I am your host, your brother, your humble servant, the Black Authority with Professor Black Truth. And until next time, brothers and sisters from around the world, remember, black is the future, and the future is uncompromising.